Hi everybody, this is the Baseball Hut, the amazing, spectacular, terrific, the great one, the people's champion, your host, the Hut. In this video, we're going to talk about the Mets offseason, the strengths and the weaknesses, and whether they're World Series bound, and it starts right now. Before we get into this video, I'm going to need you to subscribe to this channel and like this video. I do plenty of Mets content on here and Major League Baseball, and this is the kind of channel you want to subscribe to and follow. I'll give you everything you could possibly want out of a Mets channel. Trades, free agent signings, Mets history. I got everything here. So this is the channel you want to subscribe to. The New York Mets had a lot of questions going into the offseason. Now, as you know, the Mets won 101 games in 2022, but they had a boatload of free agents. Those include Jacob deGrom, Chris Bassett, Taijuan Walker, Brandon Nimmo, Edwin Diaz, amongst many, many free agents they had. They had the most free agents of any team, the most free agents of any team that went to postseason. Now, they won 101 games, but there are a lot of question marks going into this offseason that they needed to address. First thing they needed to do, and they did, was they re-signed Edwin Diaz to a 5-year contract. He had the best season of any reliever in 2022. And he proved himself to be a worthy candidate to get an extension from the Mets, and they gave him that 5-year deal. Now, the biggest exit happened in December, and that was Jacob deGrom, the 2-time Cy Young Award winner for the New York Mets, the Rookie of the Year, pitched in the World Series for the Mets, and he opted out of his contract, his last year that he had. And he signed with the Texas Rangers on a 5-year deal. The Mets did not want to give him more than 3 years, so he opted out and moved to Texas. Now, the Mets pivoted, and they brought in the 3-time Cy Young Award winner, 244-game winner, Justin Verlander, probably the preeminent right-hander of his generation. So they replaced deGrom with Verlander. That's pretty good. Now, they lost Chris Bassett, who was a mainstay in the rotation for this past year in 2022. Won 15 games. Mets acquired him from the Oakland A's. He left to go to Minnesota. The Mets, in a lateral move, or whatever you want to call it, they signed Jose Quintana to a 2-year deal. He pitched for the Pirates and the Cardinals last year. And as you know, the Cardinals went to postseason. He pitched rather well the last 2 months there in St. Louis. Now, another huge addition was they brought in Kodai Senga, the big Japanese pitcher that he was a free agent. He wasn't posted. As you know, some Japanese teams, they post some of these players. And he was just a strict free agent. The Mets signed him to a 5-year, $75 million contract. And in the process, they also lost starter Taijuan Walker to the rival Philadelphia Phillies. Now, the Mets are basically left with having to rebuild their whole entire starting rotation. They were able to pick up the option to Carlos Correa, who had a very solid year, considering that he'd had a lot of injuries, and he was coming off a few years ago from having had cancer. So his contract was brought up. Now, the one thing about this Mets pitching staff in particular is they're older. So that is a weakness that the Mets will have to deal with sometime during the 2023 season. Now, they were able, with a lot of sort of concern from a lot of people, they re-signed Brandon Nimmo to an 8-year deal, essentially saying that he's going to be a Met for life. As you know, he had a big year last year. He was one of the best center fielders in the game, and he was the best center fielder on the market aside from Aaron Judge, the Yankee. And they signed him to an 8-year deal, and for reasonably, market deal, which is what he received. Now, the Mets had been very concerned about the catching situation, so they brought in a new catcher, Omar Narvaez, on a 2-year deal. The Mets have Francisco Alvarez, who's probably not quite ready to play every day. Mets' big prospect. And they had to sort of unload James McCann because I know they weren't too happy with his performance. He played very poorly the first 2 years of his 4-year contract. So the Mets shipped him off to Baltimore for a low-level minor leaguer, and they sort of flip-flopped that, and they also re-signed Tomas Nido to a 2-year extension, forfeiting the last 2 years of his free agency. Now we're going to talk about another player the Mets brought in was David Robertson. He's 38 years old. He's been a setup man for the Yankees. He was the setup man for the 2009 World Championship Yankee team. He had been a closer. He took over for Mariano Rivera. They signed him to a 1-year deal, and he essentially replaced Seth Lugo. Seth Lugo went to San Diego. Seth is going to be a starter / reliever, and the Mets wanted to bring in a guy that's an 8th inning guy, strong 8th inning guy, and even at his older age, Robertson is very good. They were able to re-sign Adam Ottavino to a 2-year deal, which was interesting. He pitched very well for the Mets. He was very happy being here, so he did a really good job, and they gave him a 2-year deal. Now they made a trade with the Tampa Bay Rays, and they brought in Brooks Raley, and he replaced Julio Rodriguez as the lefty in the bullpen. The Mets essentially did not have a lefty. Rodriguez was not as effective, and he didn't have the kind of impact that you needed late in a game against a left-handed bat. Brooks Raley should be able to do that. Now, right before the last few weeks, they signed Tommy Pham. The Mets were looking for a 4th outfielder, somebody they can play a little bit right field, left field, be another DH type. Now, most of these moves, if not all of these moves, have been positives. The negatives and the sort of weaknesses of their offseason is really essentially what they went into their offseason when the season ended in October. This is a team that is a very good offensive team. They put the ball in play. It'll be interesting to see how they perform in terms of the lack of the shift now. But they're a team that puts the ball in play. They're a team that is able to work the count. They're able to really grind out at bats. They're excellent at that. They scored the 5th most runs in the National League, I believe, in 2022. They were excellent with men's scoring position. But the biggest problem they had was they did not have enough power on this team. They have essentially Pete Alonso, Francisco Lindor, and a lot of guys that they need a little more oomph to this lineup. So they did not bring in a number 5 hitter as protection for Pete Alonso. So that is a negative that they will be carrying into the season, really into spring training, into the season. There will be bats available, I believe, for a 5 hitter down the line. There are a couple free agents to keep an eye on. Javi Baez, believe it or not, has an opt-out. If he gets off to a fast start, he will opt out of that contract in Detroit. Detroit is not a good situation right now. Also keep an eye on Jorge Soler, just to give you just sort of an idea of the kind of players the Mets should be considering during the season before the trading deadline on August 1st. Now, another weakness of this offseason, which became a drama around the time of Christmas and New Year's, was this Carlos Correa business. They had a contract in principle with Correa until an issue showed up with his physical in regards to this ankle injury he suffered in 2014. Now, Carlos Correa had signed a contract prior to that with the San Francisco Giants, and the issue popped up. And then when the Mets had a physical done on him, they had the same problem. The Mets tried to feverishly rework the contract. They tried to reduce the years. They tried to reduce the money, and that did not work out. It became a big problem for the New York Mets, considering they had made a big deal out of it. The Mets owner, Steve Cohen, had said that they were going to sign him, that he was a very important piece to this offseason. That did not happen. So because of that, the Mets are going to go with Eduardo Escobar starting the season as the everyday starting third baseman. Now, the Mets won 101 games, but he did not have a good season beyond the September that he had, which he was the National League Player of the Month for September. But for the most part, he was pretty much invisible as a bat. They really missed him most of the season. Now, these are the things here that are the positives and negatives and the weaknesses and the strengths of this offseason. They won 101 games. But the quality of the play was excellent. They were tough late in the game. Their offense grinded out at bats. Their pitching was very good. And I've said this for 2 years doing this channel. The Mets get offense, they will win. And the Mets must be able to manage this offense going forward and maintain that level of quality throughout the entire lineup. They have one of the best lineups in terms of 1 through 4 in baseball, with Nimmo, Marte, Lindor, and Alonso. They need to beef up the middle of this lineup. That is a major problem. The bottom lineup is good. Mets had the best hitter in the National League with Jeff McNeil. So this is a team that has a lot of aspirations to win the World Series. Now, are they World Series bound? Well, the Philadelphia Phillies proved to us that you don't have to win 100 games to get to postseason and to win and get to the World Series. You need to make some smart moves before the trading deadline. You need to ride some hot pitchers, get a couple of guys hot, and you will win. The issue in the last month, in September and in October, 4 things did not happen. 1, they did not get performance out of Jacob deGrom. They did not get a performance out of Max Scherzer. And Pete Alonso and Francisco Lindor did not hit as well as they had for most of the season. So when you add those 4 things up, you have to sort of find a way to improve that. Now, deGrom is gone. Now you're bringing a pitcher who's much older. So there are some issues here that the Mets are going to have to rectify and figure out. But they are World Series bound at this point, in my mind, due to the fact that they are in it to win it, that this ownership group will do whatever they have to do to win this thing. I feel very strongly about it. So, thank you for watching this video. I will have more stuff like this if you want. And, of course, please subscribe to the Baseball Hut. Thank you, and I'll see you later.